I'll be going back to my parents' place tomorrow," she told me, leaving me with nothing to do but sigh. Over 30 and anxious to get married, I ended up with a woman who was dazzled by my career at a major corporation. So, when she found out I got laid off, she quickly brought up divorce. "Can you even manage at your parents' place?" "It's fine. It's a proper place, unlike here," she said, packing her things and leaving. Apparently, our home wasn't proper enough for her. Is this what happens when you get laid off from a big company? I sighed again, looking at the empty entrance. A few months later, I was in a corner of a mixed-use building. "Mike, after you finish that hallway, can you take care of the restroom upstairs?" "Sure, got it." Finding a job was tough after the layoff. Being from a big company, I'd passed the paperwork but come off too strong in interviews, making the interviewers frown. I guess I was hard to employ. No company seemed willing to hire me. During my job hunt, the local job center suggested a cleaning company. Luckily, I got the job and successfully switched careers. Now, I'm on site training. Of course, cleaning is new to me, and I spend most days getting yelled at. Man, cleaning's tougher than I thought. Maybe it's not for me, but I gotta work to eat, I muttered, smoking on the rooftop during a break. That's when I saw a little girl crouching by the roadside. "What's going on?" I was wide-eyed with shock. That girl seemed off. She didn't move an inch. I still have time during my lunch break, so I ran down the stairs to check on her. "Hey, are you okay?" When I went to see her and spoke to her, she turned her pale face towards me. She might be around 10 years old. "What's a little girl doing here?" "I'm sorry, my stomach hurts a bit." "Wow, that's tough. Were you heading home early from school?" She shook her head at my question. "Well, I have to buy lunch for everyone." Saying that, the girl took out her trembling hand with a wallet. She showed me a note inside her wallet. "What's this?" It had a list of foods like hamburgers and sandwiches written in a child's handwriting. "I have to buy what everyone wants to eat, or else I'll be left out again." What, really? I realized what she was doing from her words. Seems like her classmates had sent her to buy lunch. That's almost like bullying. "Young lady, forget the shopping. Let's go home now. You're pale as a ghost." What should I do? She swayed right in front of me. "Are you okay?" I supported her, holding her up. I needed to protect her without looking suspicious. "Then, I'll call your school, so tell me the phone number." Okay. I called her elementary school and arranged for her teacher to pick her up. Meanwhile, she rested in our break room in the mixed-use building. Sending a sick kid on an errand during lunchtime. What kind of teacher is in charge? It's not the teacher's fault. It's because I don't follow what everyone says. Lying on the bench, she weakly spoke to the manager, Josh. But this is a bit much. To make a child with a cold run errands when she has school lunch is nothing more than harassment. Is it? She looked down at Josh's words. "Anyway, you should drink something first." I handed her a sports drink. "Thank you." A slight smile appeared on her face. Seeing her adorable smile, I found myself smiling too. Such a polite and good kid. Why would her classmates do something so awful to her? I can't believe it. Then, there was a voice at the door of the break room. "Excuse me, I heard my daughter is here." Looking towards the door, I saw a young woman, out of breath, standing next to a stern-looking man. The woman, looking sorry, rushed over to us. "I'm the mother of Kayla, the girl you've been looking after. I'm Johnson, her teacher." Mr. Johnson and her mom. Got it. "I'm really sorry for the trouble my daughter has caused." "No, she hasn't caused any trouble at all." Kayla's mom bowed deeply, but I shook my head. "Rather, please let Kayla rest at home as soon as possible. If she keeps going like this, Her condition might worsen. She needs to see a doctor. That's when Mr. Johnson, standing next to the mother, said something astonishing. I understand you are not feeling well, but there's a problem with your behavior too. What? The atmosphere froze at Mr. Johnson's words. What is this man talking about? You say there was harassment, but leaving school to go shopping requires some serious reflection. I interrupted Mr. Johnson mid-sentence. Are you even fit to be a teacher? What's wrong with you? I'm just stating the obvious. Don't you feel anything for this girl, who's been bullied into shopping by her classmates? Are you out of your mind? Are you even a teacher? Manager Josh backed me up. Mr. Johnson glared at me angrily and continued. Normally, you should refuse. If you can't do that, doesn't it reflect a lack of home training? Is it my fault? For some reason, Mr. Johnson turned his gaze to Kayla's mother and said that. It's not my mom's fault. Kayla, who had been lying down, suddenly sat up and glared at Mr. Johnson. What's that attitude towards your teacher? Everyone told me. They said my mom's school lunches taste bad, so I should bring tasty stuff from the convenience store. If not, they'd tell Mr. Johnson and get my mom fired from the lunch diner. That's terrible. Is that true? Kayla's mother looked shocked, staring at her daughter. Even Mr. Johnson seemed surprised by this revelation and started asking Kayla for more details. What do you mean by that? I've been told for a long time by the kids in my class. They say my house is a poor single-parent home with a mom who makes lousy school lunches. They don't want to hang out with me because they think poverty is contagious. So, might that be a misunderstanding? Kayla, when I heard about this earlier and checked with the students, they said that wasn't true. Of course, they wouldn't admit it. Kayla glared at Mr. Johnson through her tears. Well, that may be, but... Mr. Johnson was flustered and fell silent. We'll be leaving for today. I will report this bullying incident to the school. Kayla's mother, who had been watching, said this to Mr. Johnson. He looked surprised, staring at the girl's mother. The mother turned away from Mr. Johnson's gaze and said to Kayla, Let's go, Kayla. We've caused a lot of trouble. I'm very sorry. Thank you, sirs. Kayla and her mother bowed to us and left the break room. The problem was, Mr. Johnson, the teacher, just stood there watching the mother and daughter, saying nothing. Aren't you going back to the school, Mr. Johnson? Yes, I will return, but there are things I want to think about. Mr. Johnson stood there stunned, tears welling up in his eyes. I'm not in a position to say this, but I think what you just said is the worst thing I've ever heard from a teacher. When I said that, Mr. Johnson's tears started to flow uncontrollably. I felt sorry for him, even though I thought it was pathetic. Well, life doesn't always go as planned, you know. I patted Mr. Johnson on the shoulder. Then, Mr. Johnson turned his tear-stained face to me and said, I'm sorry, but do you have time to meet soon? A few days later, Mr. Johnson and I were sitting together in a pub. I thought I was doing all right, but, realizing that everything Kayla said was true, I didn't know what to do. Mr. Johnson said, his eyes brimming with tears again. Well, nobody expects a student they trust to lie, right? I listened as Mr. Johnson told me what happened next. It turned out that several kids in Mr. Johnson's class had been harassing Kayla. And to make matters worse, the ringleader was a top student, supposedly a good friend of Kayla's. The harassment started because a classmate's mom said, Kayla is from a poor single-parent home. She's not like our wealthy families. What a terrible thing to say, making such classist remarks. Mr. Johnson shook his head in dismay. People like that really make life difficult, saying such things. Even as a cleaner, I remembered being shouted at by businessmen. Move it, you're in the way. People always seem to be looking for someone they can consider beneath them. I remembered my boss David often saying. Then Mr. Johnson began to speak out of the blue. Thinking about what happened, I really feel terrible for Kayla's mom. But Mr. Johnson, you've reflected on your actions, right? And now you're actively working to solve the harassment issue, aren't you? is there something else on your mind? I asked him, seeing the worried look on his face. Then Mr. Johnson, looking down, said, I've hardly had time to rethink my own words and actions. Maybe Mr. Johnson just didn't have an outlet. So, how about having a drink with me regularly? Really? Yeah, it's like a reflection session. We create a space to vent our weaker sides. Ah, I see. It's like counseling. Talking and being listened to. Reassessing oneself. Yeah, that might help me look at myself more calmly. Mr. Johnson said this with a relieved smile. Hearing him, I thought, this guy, once you talk to him, isn't so bad. I smiled back at him. From then on, Mr. Johnson and I started going out for drinks regularly. Mr. Johnson would talk about the kids' problems, and I'd let him hear my work complaints. Maybe because we both had a place to vent, our jobs started going surprisingly well. I became serious about my work and quickly got promoted to chief manager, taking over for Josh. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so, how are things with Kayla's mom? Well, I'm transferring to a different school next year, and we've decided to get married around that time. Mr. Johnson shared, a bit shyly. Turns out, Mr. Johnson started dating Kayla's mom after all that. He had visited her home to apologize, shared his own experience of growing up in a single-parent home, talked about the individual meetings he held with each student, and reported back during homeroom discussions. Gradually, more kids began to side with Kayla, and the child who had been bullying her eventually transferred to another school. As he continued to share these updates, he regularly reported back, which eventually led to their relationship. So, is Kayla okay with it? Yes, I'll work hard to be called Dad by her from next year. His face was beaming in a way that was unrecognizable from when I first met him. Then, cheers to Mr. Johnson, the soon-to-be dad. We clinked our beer glasses. Life has its ups and downs, but having friends to share complaints with can make a big difference. I look forward to continuing my friendship with Mr. Johnson as drinking buddies for a long time to come.